The moment my parents handed my sister the keys to a brand new white Mercedes, I was sitting right there, clutching a folder from the hospital, holding my surgery estimate like it was invisible. That's when I knew. Not thought, not suspected. I knew I was nothing more than an afterthought in that family. My name is Serafina Dorn, and this story isn't about sibling rivalry or jealous comparisons. It's about survival, about the moment I realized love doesn't always come from those who are supposed to love you. Sometimes it comes from the quietest corner of your life. And sometimes the loudest betrayal doesn't scream. It sits beside you on the couch, nodding politely while giving your sister everything and giving you nothing. I wasn't asking for a car. I wasn't even asking for comfort. I was asking to live, to not be in pain every day. But in my parents' eyes, a leather interior and shiny chrome meant more than the agony twisting through my body. That night, while they cheered and clapped for Alina's hard-earned reward, I felt something deeper than pain. I felt erased, and it took someone completely unexpected to write me back into the story. This is how it happened. The first time I felt it, I thought it was just a bad meal, some greasy lunch special from the diner where I worked, or maybe too much coffee on an empty stomach. But the second time, and then the third, the pain came back stronger. It wasn't sharp at first, just a slow, dragging ache on my right side. But over the next few weeks, it started curling tighter, like a hand inside me, squeezing harder every time I ignored it. Still, I kept going. I couldn't afford to stop. I worked part-time at a coffee shop near the freeway and picked up shifts at a secondhand bookstore on weekends. Rent didn't wait. Groceries didn't care. And besides, I'd been trained since childhood to brush things off. It's just a stomach bug, I told myself. You'll be fine. I wasn't. The night I doubled over while stocking the pastry case, my manager practically dragged me to the break room. My hands were clammy, and my breath was shallow. I sat there, gripping the edge of a folding chair, while the fluorescent lights buzzed above me like judgment. A few days later, I finally went to the community clinic. The doctor ran some blood work, poked around gently, then gave me that look, the one where they try to smile but can't quite hide what they know. "You need to see a specialist," she said. The specialist confirmed it. Something was wrong, really wrong, the kind of wrong that doesn't go away with ginger tea and a heating pad. "You might need surgery," he told me, tapping the pen against my chart. Soon. That one word, surgery, hit like cold water. I didn't have insurance. I barely had savings. What I had was a shoebox under my bed, with maybe $400 in it, and a prayer that I'd make rent on time next month. So I did what I never liked doing. I asked for help. It was a Tuesday night. I waited until after dinner, until the kitchen was quiet, and the TV was murmuring in the background. Mom was half scrolling through her phone. Dad was sipping from the same chipped mug he'd had for years. I stood there, hands sweating, voice stuck in my throat. "Can I talk to you both for a second?" They glanced at each other, then back at me like I'd just interrupted something important. I told them everything. About the pain, the specialist, the potential surgery, the cost. The silence afterward was louder than anything I'd ever heard. Mom's first response? A shrug. "That again? You always say your stomach hurts." I wanted to scream. I didn't. I explained it wasn't just a stomachache. It was more. I showed them the papers, the estimate. Dad exhaled like I'd asked for a loan to go to Europe. "We're in a rough patch, honey. Things are tight. Inflation, you know. We just paid for the roof. Maybe you can look into one of those crowdfunding websites. That's what people do now." I nodded slowly. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I said, "Okay," and walked away. They didn't stop me. They didn't ask if I was scared or in pain. They didn't ask if I needed a ride to the hospital. They just turned the volume back up and went back to their show. Later that night, I sat in my room and stared at the same ceiling I grew up under, the one with the little cracks shaped like rivers, and I realized I wasn't just sick. I was truly, utterly alone. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had happened, took orders, refilled the half and half, cleaned the espresso machine. Every movement sent a throb through my side. I clenched my jaw and pushed through it. Because what else could I do? At home, I avoided meals. Not because I was angry, because I couldn't pretend. I couldn't sit across from them and smile like their indifference hadn't carved something out of me. I grabbed leftovers when no one was looking, ate in silence at the edge of my bed. I didn't bring it up again. Not because I didn't need the help, but because they'd already answered me loud and clear. They didn't see me, not the real me, not the one in pain, not the one quietly asking, "Am I worth saving?" I knew the answer. It was 3 days after they told me no. I was folding laundry on my bed when I heard the crunch of tires in the driveway, followed by laughter, the kind that bubbles out when people are happy without effort. I peeked through the blinds just in time to see Alina stepping out of a rideshare car, her hair perfect, her nails bright red, pulling a suitcase that looked more expensive than my last 3 paychecks combined. She'd come home from college, and the world, as always, was ready to roll out the red carpet. Dad met her on the porch, with a grin wide enough to split his face. "Come out here," he said, waving her over like he was about to show her something magical. She looked confused at first, then followed him toward the driveway. That's when Mom appeared, holding a silver car key tied with a red ribbon. And that's when I saw it. A brand new white Mercedes parked in the middle of the driveway, shining under the morning sun like something out of a commercial. It was pristine, not a scratch on the paint, the chrome glinting like a mirror. Alina froze. Then she squealed, "No freaking way!" and ran into Mom's arms. "You deserve it," Mom said, beaming. "Straight A's, internships, Dean's List, you've earned this." I stood there, still holding a pair of jeans in my hands, heart sinking. Dad walked her around the car like it was a trophy. Fully loaded, sunroof, Bluetooth, leather seats, the works. They posed for pictures, laughed, hugged, cheered. Alina did a little happy dance. The engine purred when Dad started it. I watched her slide into the driver's seat like it had always belonged to her. They were so proud, so generous, so full of joy. And not once did anyone look toward the window where I stood, like I wasn't even there. It wasn't about the car. I didn't want a Mercedes. I wanted to breathe without pain. I wanted to know that if I collapsed in the middle of my shift, someone would care. Apparently, that was too much to ask. That night, I heard them through the walls during dinner. Alina was already talking about how heads turned when she drove onto campus. "People were staring like I was a celebrity," she said, laughing. "One guy literally walked into a bike rack trying to check me out." I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, scrolling through her social media. There she was, leaning against the hood of the Mercedes, captioned with, "Dream big, babes, manifestation works." Heart emojis, fire emojis, comments like, "You're so inspiring and deserved." Deserved. That word hit me harder than anything else. What had she done that I hadn't? Had I not worked hard? Had I not followed the rules? Had I not tried to be the daughter they could be proud of? But none of that mattered, apparently, because I wasn't shiny enough. I wasn't loud enough. I didn't sparkle. I was invisible. So I got up the next morning and picked up an extra shift. Pain still curled behind my ribs like something alive, but I didn't let it slow me down. I cleared tables, brewed coffee, wiped counters. I said, "Have a great day," through gritted teeth while sweat ran down my spine. I didn't complain. I didn't cry. I just moved, because if I stopped, I'd collapse. And when I got home, the house was still full of laughter, still full of talk about the car. I slipped in, grabbed a plate of cold spaghetti from the fridge, and ate on the floor of my room. It was quieter there. No one asked me how my day was. No one asked me anything. I became a ghost in the same house I grew up in, and the silence was louder than any argument could have been. The only time I saw my parents really look at me was when I coughed too loud or left the bathroom light on. Then they noticed. Then they sighed or muttered something under their breath. But not once did anyone say, "Are you okay?" That weekend, Alina left again. She hugged Mom and Dad goodbye and peeled out of the driveway in her new car like she was late for a movie premiere. I watched from behind the curtain, not because I cared, but because I was trying to understand, trying to figure out when exactly I became the spare child. The extra, the one you don't budget for, the one you don't choose. I wasn't bitter. Not really. I was just tired. Tired of being the one who swallowed everything. Tired of pretending it didn't matter. Tired of aching in a body no one wanted to save. And as I lay in bed that night, holding my heating pad against my stomach, I realized something that scared me. I wasn't just invisible. I was becoming numb. I was dragging myself through the front door after a double shift when the knock came. I opened it to find Grandpa standing there, his coat zipped up, cane in hand, eyes sharper than I remembered. "Your parents home?" he asked. I shook my head. "Just me." He looked me over. "You look pale." "I'm just tired," I lied, but my voice cracked. My stomach ached so badly, I could barely stand straight. "Sit," he said, walking into the kitchen like he owned the place. I obeyed. I always did with Grandpa. He didn't raise his voice, didn't scold. He just had that presence, the kind that made you tell the truth. "What's going on?" he asked. I stared at the table. "I might need surgery," I whispered. "The doctor said it's serious. I asked Mom and Dad for help. They said I should take out a loan." He didn't flinch, didn't speak. Just stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I saw the car," he said quietly. "The one they bought for Alina." I didn't say anything. "I'll take care of it," he added, standing. "Don't worry." And that was it. No questions, no lectures. He just left. That Sunday, he invited us all to dinner at his house. When we arrived, everything looked normal. The roast chicken, the same tablecloth, the smell of his cinnamon pie. But the air was different, tight. After dessert, Grandpa stood. "I've rewritten my will," he said. "Everything I have will go to the one person in this family who was abandoned when she needed you most." He didn't need to say my name. Everyone knew. Mom blinked rapidly. Dad opened his mouth, but no words came. Grandpa continued, his voice calm but sharp. "She came to you in pain. You told her to figure it out, then turned around and handed your other daughter a brand new car." He laid down a stack of papers, my medical reports, bills, even the estimate for the Mercedes. "Here's what you chose. Here's what you ignored." Alina mumbled, "I didn't ask for the car." Grandpa looked at her. "But you didn't ask about your sister either." Silence, cold and final. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. The next morning, Grandpa came to pick me up without much of a word. He didn't ask how I was feeling or if I was ready. He just said, "Come on, we've got somewhere to be," and waited at the car until I locked the door behind me. An hour later, I was sitting in the pristine lobby of a private hospital, dizzy from disbelief. The place smelled like clean linen and fresh lavender. The receptionist smiled like I belonged there. Grandpa had arranged everything. "Pre-op is already scheduled," he said calmly. "You'll meet the surgeon in an hour." It felt like stepping into a different universe, one where I mattered. The surgery happened the next day. Complicated, the doctor said, but successful. Another week, and I might have been dealing with something irreversible. The words chilled me, but all I could do was whisper, "Thank you," when Grandpa appeared at my bedside, newspaper in hand like it was any other morning. He visited every day. Sometimes he talked, sometimes he just sat, peeling apples with a pocket knife or humming some tune I didn't recognize. He never made me feel like a burden, not once. He just showed up. And for the first time, I realized love didn't need to be loud. It didn't need confetti or praise or Facebook posts. It just needed consistency, quiet presence, someone sitting beside you when everything hurts. When I got discharged, things at home were awkward. Alina tried to speak to me once. She tapped on my door with a mug of herbal tea and hovered like she didn't know where to place it. "I didn't mean for things to be so unfair," she said. "I didn't know it was that serious." I just looked at her. She left before finishing her sentence. My parents didn't say much either. A text from Mom, a call from Dad where he rambled about the weather. No mention of the hospital, no apology, just a weird politeness, like we were coworkers forced to make small talk. But I didn't need them to say anything anymore. I wasn't waiting for a conversation that would never come. Because the truth was, I wasn't the broken one. I'd spent years asking myself what I lacked, why I wasn't enough. But there was never anything wrong with me. I wasn't unlovable. I was just with people who didn't know how to love properly. And once I stopped trying to earn their affection, I started healing. Grandpa kept showing up. Not in grand ways, he wasn't that kind of man. But he'd bring over soup, or fix the leaky faucet, or walk with me to the corner store just so I'd stretch my legs. One afternoon, we sat in his backyard under a big oak tree, sipping ginger ale from glass bottles. "You're doing better," he said, nodding. "I am," I replied, and I meant it. He gave a small smile. "You don't owe anyone anything, you know. Not even the people who gave you life. Not if they never gave you love." His words stuck with me long after he said them, because for the first time, someone had acknowledged it out loud, that I wasn't imagining the neglect, that my pain had been real, that I mattered, even if they never saw it. That day, something inside me settled. Grandpa had already rewritten his will, but that wasn't what changed my life. It was that he saw me. He chose me. And that, more than any inheritance, was what truly saved me. Weeks passed. The bruises faded, the stitches dissolved, and my body began to move without wincing. I went on slow walks, sipped soup without nausea, and finally slept through the night. But healing isn't just about the body. It's about the silence, too. It's about learning how to stop measuring your worth by how much someone else claps when you're in pain. My parents didn't suddenly change. There were no grand gestures, no flowers, no apology letters tucked under my pillow. Just polite distance. A text from Mom on a Tuesday asking if I needed more vitamin supplements. A voicemail from Dad saying he'd heard I was back on my feet and hoped I was feeling better. I didn't respond, not because I was bitter, but because I had finally learned the difference between being tolerated and being loved. Alina posted another photo of her car last week. The caption read, "Still can't believe this beauty is mine." People flooded her comments again. Heart emojis, queen comments, flames, and applause. Let them. She lives in a world that claps for polished surfaces. I live in a quieter one now, one that values the sound of footsteps outside your hospital room when everyone else has gone home. I still visit Grandpa every Sunday. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we sit on his back porch and just exist, letting the wind do the talking. Last week, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a deed to a small cabin upstate. "Needs work," he said, "but it's yours if you want it. Somewhere to breathe." I didn't cry, but my throat tightened in that painful, beautiful way. The way it does when you realize someone truly sees you and asks for nothing in return. That cabin, that surgery, that seat across the Sunday table, they weren't rewards. They were recognition, proof that I mattered, that someone noticed the invisible girl in the back of the room. That love, when it's real, doesn't come with conditions. It just shows up. Grandpa did more than save my life. He reminded me I had one. And maybe the most unexpected part? He didn't need to. He wasn't obligated to fight for me. He just did, quietly, fiercely, without asking for anything back. That's love. That's family. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you won't. But if you're lucky, someone else will choose to. And when they do, don't look back. That's where healing lives. Not in their regret, not in their silence, but in the arms of someone who chose to see you when no one else did. The moment I opened my eyes, I knew something was terribly wrong, and it wasn't just the wreckage of my body. My name is Sabine Ward, and I had just woken up from a 2-month coma. The beeping machines, the dull ache in my spine, the sterile brightness of the hospital room, none of it shocked me as much as the silence. The kind of silence that follows disaster. I could feel it in my bones before anyone even spoke a word. They told me I was lucky to be alive after the accident. That recovery would take time. That I shouldn't worry about work. But when Lena, my assistant, my anchor for the past 5 years, came to visit, the weight of what I'd lost hit me harder than the crash ever did. Her eyes were swollen, voice shaky, and in her hands was a thick envelope she couldn't even bring herself to open right away. "Sabine," she whispered. "I tried everything I could, but it's gone. Mallory took it all." Mallory Vexley, my sister-in-law. In that instant, I understood. While I had been unconscious, she had done what she had always wanted to do, taken my company, my clients, my staff, my legacy. But what Mallory didn't know, what she never imagined in all her greed and arrogance, was that I had been planning for this moment long before the accident ever happened. She stole my company while I was in a coma. Now I was awake, and I was ready. The days that followed were a blur of IV drips, whispered conversations between nurses, and endless tests. My muscles had atrophied, my balance was gone, and every movement came with a reminder that my body had been abandoned for weeks. But my mind was racing. While my doctors urged rest, I couldn't stop replaying Lena's words. "It's gone. Mallory took it all." I demanded details, even when my voice barely rose above a whisper. Lena hesitated, but finally, she told me everything. 2 weeks after my accident, Mallory and my brother Noah called an emergency board meeting, with me incapacitated and no projected date for recovery. They invoked a clause in the company bylaws for leadership incapacity. On paper, it looked clean, a technical maneuver. In reality, it was a coup. I owned 60% of Ward Strategies, a boutique agency I'd built from scratch. I had put in 12-hour days, 7 days a week for a decade. And just like that, it was dissolved. Its assets, like clients, equipment, even the office lease, were absorbed into a new entity, Phoenix Vexley Media. "Phoenix," I muttered. "How poetic." Mallory had always resented my success. From the moment Noah introduced her at a family dinner 5 years ago, she had eyed my achievements like they were lottery winnings. She'd make offhand comments. "It must be nice having everything handed to you," as if I hadn't bled for every contract I landed. But what cut deepest wasn't Mallory's betrayal. It was Noah's. "He said it was just business," Lena whispered. "He claims you would have understood. Just business, like dismantling my life's work, was a negotiation over coffee." I stared at the ceiling that night and felt a rage so clean, so cold, it could sharpen steel. I wasn't just angry, I was focused. The second night after waking, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind took me back, not to the accident, but to the years before. To the subtle shifts, the way Mallory used to linger in my office a little too long, the questions she asked, disguised as curiosity about my world. She'd once asked to see the company bylaws, said she wanted to understand how our family business worked now that she'd married into it. I should have known then. But I remembered more than her questions. I remembered the unease that settled in my gut when I caught her using one of our admin logins late one night. She smiled, said she was just curious about our client list. I didn't confront her. I documented it, quietly, thoroughly, and I started preparing. There were some things I learned early in my career, mostly from my father, Victor Hanley. He'd been a legend in the PR world back in the 80s. After he retired, he became my silent advisor. We used to talk every Sunday over bourbon and legal pads, and one night, when I told him I didn't trust Mallory, he leaned back and said, "Then don't fight her, not yet. Trap her, paper her every move, and when she moves, make sure she walks straight into the teeth of it." So I did. I built a mirrored archive, a secure offshore server that backed up every contract, every vendor record, every internal memo. I encrypted the access, buried it beneath layers only I could trace. And I opened a secondary fund in the Cayman Islands under a dormant LLC. Every month, I quietly diverted a fraction of our profits there. Not enough to raise alarms, just enough to matter. At the time, it felt paranoid. Now it felt like prophecy. I wasn't planning revenge. I was preparing for betrayal. The following week, I refused the hospital's suggestion to transfer me to a long-term care facility. No, I told the doctor flatly. I need to be somewhere I can work. He blinked, confused. You're still regaining basic mobility, Miss Ward. Then I'd better hurry. He thought I meant desk work. What I meant was retribution. Every morning started with grueling physical therapy, stretches that made me grit my teeth, exercises that set my arms shaking. But I leaned into the pain. I welcomed it. Because every strained breath, every aching muscle reminded me I was alive and I had something to reclaim. You're not just healing, Lena said one day as she helped me back into bed. You're loading a weapon. She wasn't wrong. While Mallory flaunted her conquest, granting interviews, hosting lavish cocktail hours under the Phoenix Vexley banner, I was busy collecting receipts. Lena, still connected to our internal Slack and cloud systems, quietly funneled me everything: project delays, client feedback, and internal whispers about Mallory's erratic decisions. She was already overpromising, overstaffing, and mismanaging funds. Classic amateur moves. Mallory knew how to seize power. She didn't know how to hold it. And then, like clockwork, she came to gloat. I heard the click of designer heels echoing down the hall before I saw her. Mallory swept into my hospital room as if she owned the wing. Perfectly coiffed, overly perfumed, she smiled like a cat who'd eaten every canary in the cage. Sabine, she said brightly, you're looking better than expected. I tilted my head. So are you. Theft must suit you. She laughed, flicking imaginary lint off her lapel. You really should rest, you know. Phoenix is thriving. We had to do something. Your company was paralyzed. So you took it. Not alone, she said with a knowing shrug. The board agreed, and Noah. He understood. We did what was necessary. The casual mention of my brother hit like a punch to the chest, but I didn't flinch. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. You always wanted it, I said coolly. You just waited until I couldn't fight back. She raised an eyebrow. This isn't personal, Sabine, it's just business. I gave her a thin smile. Of course it is. That flicker in her eyes, that brief flash of hesitation, was all I needed. When she left, Lena shut the door behind her and locked it. We didn't speak for a minute. The air felt heavier, charged. Then Lena stepped forward and handed me a courier envelope. Inside were printouts, time-stamped records of every unauthorized login Mallory had attempted over the past 3 years. IP addresses, file names, access attempts at 2 a.m, client databases she had no business reviewing. She started snooping way before your accident, Lena said. It's all here. I stared at the documents, then reached for my notepad. We begin Thursday, I said. For what? My first move. She nodded, as if she had been waiting to hear it. And outside the window, the city buzzed on, unaware that the woman it had just written off was already setting the chessboard. The first time Noah visited me in the hospital, he didn't bring flowers. He brought excuses. He stood in the doorway like someone waiting to be told to leave. In one hand was a coffee he didn't drink. In the other, guilt he didn't know how to carry. I didn't think you'd be awake so soon, he said, eyes darting anywhere but mine. I didn't answer. I just stared. He shifted from foot to foot, finally clearing his throat. Look, I didn't know what else to do. You were gone, Sabine. There was no timeline. The board was freaking out. Mallory, she said we had to act fast. Mallory, not my wife. Just a name like any other. She told me the company would go under if we didn't step in, that dissolving and restructuring was the only option. She had lawyers. She had a plan. Did you even question it? I asked. He looked at the floor. I thought I was protecting what you built, he said softly. There it was. Not malice, just cowardice. Noah had always been the gentler sibling. Thoughtful, sentimental, easily led. I loved him for it, but I also knew that trait made him vulnerable. especially to someone like Mallory. She didn't need to lie to him. She just needed to feed him a version of the truth he could live with. She said it was the best decision for everyone, he added. And I went along with it. You didn't think I might have something to say about that? I said. You were unconscious, Sabine. And you were spineless. He flinched, but didn't defend himself. He just sat beside me, both hands gripping his coffee like it might anchor him to the moment. After that day, he began visiting more regularly. Less to explain, more to reckon. Each time he looked a little more unraveled, as if Mallory's control over him was thinning. He started asking questions, real ones. Then, one afternoon, he arrived with a folder. I think she's hiding things, he said, dropping into the chair beside me. I've been going through reports, cross-checking invoices. Something's off. I'm seeing gaps in revenue reports, double-billed clients, padded contracts. I think she's laundering money, or hiding losses, maybe both. I opened the folder. There were internal memos, budget approvals, backdated contracts. Even without my forensic lens, the irregularities jumped out like neon signs. She's running it into the ground, he said. I thought she was saving it, but I think she's killing it. I looked at him long and hard. This wasn't just regret, it was fear. He was realizing he hadn't just signed off on betrayal, he'd enabled a fraud. What do you want from me? I asked. I want you to fix it, he said, before it's too late. The shift was quiet, but undeniable. For the first time since the accident, Noah was no longer standing behind Mallory. He was standing beside me, not because I'd forgiven him, but because he finally understood the weight of what he'd helped destroy. All right, I said, but this time you do everything I tell you, no questions. He nodded. And Noah, I added before he could leave. This doesn't make us even. I know. And as the door closed behind him, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in weeks. Momentum. Exactly 2 months after I woke up in that sterile hospital room, I walked out on my own 2 feet. The autumn air hit me like a tonic. Crisp, electric, smelling faintly of burnt leaves and unfinished business. Lena waited at the curb with the car running, but I didn't give her my home address. Take me to the office. She looked over, uncertain. You sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The drive was quiet, both of us lost in thoughts we didn't voice. When we pulled into the lot of what used to be Ward Strategies, now rebranded as Phoenix Vexley Media, I almost laughed. The new sign was overdesigned, the kind of glossy branding you slap on something hollow to make it look full. Mallory's aesthetic was always loud. I'll wait here, Lena said. I stepped out, smoothed the front of my blazer, and walked inside. The security guard didn't recognize me. He was young, new, probably hired after the takeover. I have a meeting with Mallory Vexley, I said smoothly. She's expecting me. He scanned the system, frowning. I don't see... Wait, Sabine Ward? That's right. His eyes widened, then softened. Go on up. The elevator doors closed around me, and I took a slow breath. I wasn't nervous. I was composed, focused. Everything had led to this moment. The confrontation, the hand I had been patiently building piece by piece. I stepped out on the top floor, my old floor. The space had changed. The furniture was new, too modern and expensive-looking for what we were. The walls were lined with generic motivational posters, and the scent of artificial vanilla filled the air. Mallory's version of leadership, superficial and self-indulgent. I heard her voice before I saw her. I don't care if the team is overwhelmed. She snapped into her phone. We promised the campaign by next week. Make it happen. I stepped through the door just as she turned. For one satisfying moment, her jaw slackened. Her posture faltered. Then the mask returned. Sabine, she said, hanging up. You're out of the hospital. How wonderful. Clearly, I replied, stepping into the room. Looks like you've kept busy. She gestured to the office like a queen presenting her throne. Someone had to lead. You were... unavailable. I gave her a polite smile and sat down in one of the chairs facing her desk. This isn't a social call, I said. I'm here to give you a warning. She laughed, too loudly. A warning? Sabine, this company is mine now, legally. Signed, sealed, done. I reached into my bag and pulled out the USB drive, placing it carefully on her desk. Not quite, I said. That contains records of every unauthorized access attempt you made to our secure servers. 3 years' worth. And copies of financial inconsistencies, client poaching, and internal correspondence you never thought anyone would see. She paled. You're bluffing. I didn't blink. There's also a summary report prepared for the SEC, along with media contacts, and a timeline, one that starts with your first data breach attempt and ends with this moment. Her voice cracked. You can't prove anything. I already have, I said calmly, rising to my feet. But here's your chance. You have 48 hours to start the process of transferring ownership back to me, or everything on that drive becomes public. I turned toward the door, then paused. And Mallory, you may want to check your client list tomorrow. It's going to look a lot shorter. As I walked out, I heard the panic in her voice as she called her lawyers. Perfect. Let her run scared. The trap had been set, and now she was exactly where I wanted her. By the next morning, everything Mallory had stolen began to collapse. The first client to withdraw was one of our largest, a global cosmetics account. Their exit triggered a chain reaction. By mid-morning, 3 more had followed, all citing unstable leadership and questionable corporate restructuring. None of them needed convincing. These were relationships I had built over years. They had stayed with Phoenix out of convenience, not loyalty. And now, with one email, they were mine again. Lena kept me updated in real time. Screenshots of Slack channels, panicked staff emails, frantic client calls. Phoenix Vexley was on fire. Mallory locked herself in her office by noon. Noah called me, his voice almost pleading. She's unraveling. No one can get through to her. She doesn't need therapy, I said. She needs accountability. I sent over the final documents. A legal agreement prepared by my team. Clean, direct, and unmerciful. Return everything or face public exposure and possible prosecution. That evening, her lawyers reached out. We met the next morning in a corporate boardroom downtown. I arrived early and took the head of the table. When Mallory walked in, she looked wrecked, eyes sunken, jaw clenched, shoulders hunched like a woman carrying the weight of her own undoing. I laid the terms out plainly. Surrender full control, return all assets, walk away with a modest settlement. In return, I would not pursue legal action. She hesitated, but only for a moment. With a trembling hand, she signed. As she stood to leave, she paused at the door. You planned this, she whispered. No, I said softly. You handed me the pieces. I just knew how to use them. In the weeks that followed, I reclaimed what was mine. Most of the employees who had jumped ship quietly returned. Not because I begged, but because they trusted me. Under Mallory, they had felt used. Under me, they remembered what it meant to build something real. Clients who'd hesitated now lined up to re-sign, and Lena, who had never once left my side, became my new COO. Victor Hanley, my father and lifelong mentor, came by one afternoon just to sit across from my desk again. He didn't say much, just nodded once, the kind of nod that said everything. He had taught me to lead without ego, to prepare for storms, not panic when they hit, to never confuse control with vision. One evening, as I reviewed the new quarterly numbers, the security monitor pinged. I glanced up and saw a lone figure walking out of the building, cardboard box in hand. Mallory. Her hair was pulled back tight, but her posture had collapsed. For the first time, she looked small, beaten. She paused at the camera, looked up, and for a moment, our eyes met through the lens. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I didn't feel joy, just clarity. She could have built something of her own. She was smart, persuasive, even driven. But instead of using those gifts to create, she used them to steal. And in the end, she lost everything. Success isn't about how quickly you rise. It's about what you build, and whether it can stand when the ground shakes. Mallory never understood that, but I did. Ward Strategies wasn't just surviving anymore, it was thriving.